Okay, so check it out. I wanted to talk about ethics and AI today. Is that cool? Can we talk
Well, I
about
mean,
that?
you tell me. You make it cool.
Okay, so here's the situation, right? You know, I'm writing a book with AI, right? You get on Reddit and you look in some of these threads where people are talking about writing and promoting their books and stuff. They hate this idea, man. I mean, they absolutely hate it because they find,
Why?
well, they think you're cheating or they think you're ripping off other people's work. That's a big part of it. There's just a lot of hate for anybody that's using AI for writing or for any kind of creative. And I
But isn't it
wonder,
harder, Chuck? Sorry, just to jump in, but isn't it harder to write a book with AI? Because from my experience, at ChatGPT, when everyone started using it around about 10 months ago, would have been awesome for this. But they've kind of narrowed it so much that the writing style is super antiquated, right? It's quite vanilla. So I am wondering if it is easier to write a book with AI.
okay, so using ChatGPT itself has become a lot more difficult. But you can use it as a supporting tool. And as far as creating the actual narrative, I've been using the playground because you can get a raw version of the model there. Um, so what that means is when you're in ChatGPT right now, that's ChatGPT 4. That's the model that's being used, the LLM, the large language model. But they've fine-tuned it and they've used their own version of like LangChain in the end, in the back end to uh, kind of fine tune it for you, and at the same time to inject some safety rules and some other things to prevent you talking or discussing or getting certain information that might be detrimental or considered harm. And in the process, what they've done is they've toned that model down so much that it has a hard time with a lot of creatives. So especially if you're writing a sci-fi novel where people are fighting or they're cursing or any kind of creative where you have some kind of tension. ChatGPT itself isn't super awesome at that anymore. It was back in the fall, but with the changes they've made, it's not. So to get around that, you go into the playground where you can get a much more raw version of the model and you can create your own little system prompt there. And that's what I do for creating the narrative itself. But as far as creating my outlines, my character sheets, and my world docs, I just use ChatGPT and I do most of that on my phone.
So just to pause on something there before we move on to like how you've done it. So at this moment in time, then, do you think ChatGPT is still the best place for someone to write a book if they want to use AI, or should they be looking at other tools like Gemini or any of these other copywriting tools that are around? Although a lot of them are built on GPT, I know that.
Well, okay, so I think you need to use multiple models when you're doing something like what I'm doing. And part of that's because a lot of what I'm doing is getting feedback from it as well. I'm not just using it to write the narrative, I'm also using it to kind of rate and review the narrative as we go. So part of that process there is I have it write a piece of text and then I give like ChatGPT, I'll go into ChatGPT from the playground, take what was written in the playground, go to ChatGPT, and I'll say, hey, read this and identify 5 reader types that will like it, and then give me 3 metrics that we can use to judge and evaluate the tool on or the text on. And then I want you to rate it 1 to 100 on each of those metrics, and then add a 6th reader type called the harsh critic that looks for issues with your prose, issues with plot development, grammar problems, spelling problems. I mean, the harsh critic's job is to make sure that whatever you're writing will score as highly as possible for those first 5. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So that what you do then is you let the model take a look at the text and then it rates and reviews the text. And you get that and you look at it and you go, okay, this is awesome. But you don't want to just get that from ChatGPT. You want to also go into Gemini, formerly known as Bard, and do the same kind of thing there and have it also give you some ratings and reviews. And then you want to compare those two because once in a while you will find something gets missed over in ChatGPT and you find some really excellent advice over at Gemini or one of the other models you play with. It doesn't really matter which models. It's just I would use more than one to do something like this.
All right, so if that's kind of the way that you're writing the book, talk to me about some of those ethical issues then, because I get it from the purist's point of view. It's like, well, this didn't come from your own brain and you haven't had to write this out. You've not written 20,000 words from your own hand. So talk to me about these ethical issues that people have got on top of those arguments.
You see, I think part of the problem is, let's go back in time a little bit to when graphic arts first started becoming big, because we saw something very similar then. You know, you've got graphic artists who are creating pictures and stuff on the computer, and at first they weren't considered artists. Okay, they were considered cheaters. They were considered, you know, that's not really creating a painting or a picture. You need to sit down with pencil and pen, and you know, you need to follow the way we've always done it. So we've gone through something similar to this before. And a lot of it is fear, Rob. It's fear. You have people whose jobs and livelihoods are based on these things. So think of it this way. If I'm a professional author right now, I write, and most of my books are Kindle Select. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. You know, I've got a decent following. All along comes this technology that allows just anybody to suddenly write books as fast as they want. You know, they fear that. They fear people just dumping things onto the market and then devaluing what they have. Does that make sense? So it's a, I think it's a fear issue.
So are you saying that this, you're one of the pioneers then, that this is going to change, like people's minds will change? Or do you think there's always going to be this argument, like even in a bookstore, do you think bookstores are going to stock AI written books, or do you think they'll be totally against this?
Kind of weird right now because the way legislation and stuff, we saw some stuff in Europe here in the last couple of weeks where they're wanting things labeled as AI.
Hmm.
And it kind of bothers me because what does that even mean? I mean, for the last umpteen years, we've been using spell check and grammar check and copy paste and other things to help us create our narratives and our, you know, our news articles and things like that. So at what point does the technology replace that and become AI? Because all this is machine learning. You know, all of our grammar tools are going to start using these models to help us refine what we're writing. So it's all going to be in some way AI derived or backed in some way, shape, and or form.
So, so I live in Europe, and I'm just wondering, like, I'm trying to sort of take the pulse of things that I'm seeing and hearing here. A lot of people I know are aware of ChatGPT, and they're all in knowledge industries that could use ChatGPT, but they're not using it yet. I think that will change this year. I feel like if their industries don't adapt, they'll end up finding new jobs. But I think from my perspective, I wonder if it's a little bit of fear, but also along the lines of either they don't understand why it's different, or it's wanting to kind of hold on to some sort of control, right? Like, as in, this is what makes me uniquely human, right? Like, is that a view you'd share? And are you seeing that in the US?
Actually, I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot to that. It's something that it's like a badge of honor that they wear, which they should. They've done something unique. They've helped create, you know, worlds of their own, stories of their own. And I think it is. It's that fear of the unknown. They don't know how to use this. They don't know how to get into it. I would like to change that. You know, I'm not. I read a lot, Rob. It's like my one big vice. I don't really watch a lot of TV. You know, I work on the computer a lot. The one thing that I really, really enjoy doing is reading, and I read probably 100 or more books a year. You know, most of it's fiction, and it's just my escape and my getaway. You know, late at night before bed or first thing in the morning, if I get up really super early, I like to just escape for a little bit. I love to read, and I've got a lot of authors that I follow, and it bothers me that these authors may not use this technology. I think of one specifically, Eric Uglin. I love this guy's stuff, Rob. He is fantastic. He's brilliant. And for years, he was putting out a book every 2 months. This guy was like a beast. He's moved, he's had a kid, he's slowed way down. He's now doing a book like every 6 months. And Eric, you need to be using the AI, buddy. You could get all of your character plots lined out, all of it. You could knock those out so much faster, so much easier, so much smoother, and it would still be Eric Uglin's writing style. You know, he could still put it out. He doesn't actually have to have the narrative written by the AI. He could write the narrative himself, but it would be no problem, Rob, to train a model to write on his style, and all he has to do is collaborate with the bot. You know, collaborate and say, this is the scene, this is what we want to see, write it out in my style. Boom, we've got another Eric Uglin, and I can go back to having one of those every 2 months. Eric, that's what
Okay.
I'm about, Rob.
hopefully he's going to watch this. So you touched on something there that he used to write a book in 2 months, and he was doing it, as a human. So if he gets back to using AI, he could potentially write one every 2 weeks, right? He could write in his style you mentioned, but don't you see that that might be the problem for some people, is that his style is already being sucked into the machine. So his style is no longer unique anymore, right? Like anyone could replicate his style. Like how do you feel about that? And also I think there's a class action suit right now with a number of authors, right, in the US that are suing OpenAI for this kind of stuff. Like what would your response to that kind of argument be?
Okay, one, read their contracts. I know that sounds really cold, but when you give up your digital rights on certain things, you give up those digital rights. So in some of these cases, not all of these cases, but in some of these cases, those authors gave up those rights. So the models are trained on that, and that's perfectly legal. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. This is a lesson to read your contracts, either agree to it or don't agree to it. But if you want to be in these marketplaces, you almost have to agree to that. So let's go back to Eric Uglin's style. I don't think that the machine alone can recreate Eric Uglin's style. For example, if I was going to sit down and I was going to try to create a story written just like Eric Uglin, I think I would have a problem with that. And the reason why is it might put out the words the way he would write, but it still wouldn't be his story. It still wouldn't be coming from the mind of Eric. It wouldn't be following Montana in the right way. It wouldn't be following that flow. I mean, he's already created a world that his fans are following. We want to follow Montana. We want to follow Clyde. Those are two different series he has. And generally speaking, Rob, I hate book series. Okay. I'm a 3 book trilogy guy or less kind of person. I hate those long series. But that guy, Eric Uglin, he did something impossible. He created 2 different series that seemingly have no end, Eric, no end. And yet I'm dying to read the next one every time. I want the next one. I don't see somebody else being able to sit down at a machine and continue those stories. Could they get his humor and stuff in? Yeah, possibly, but you see, it's not that easy to get the machines to spit this stuff out. It takes what you put in and bounces back. It's a pattern recognition completion thing. Okay. So it's going to take an Eric Uglin, not just training it on his writing, but also working with it to create that final piece in order for it to really feel like Eric did it.
Okay, well, here's the thing then. So say that I've read all of Eric Oglin's books. So you could say I'm an expert in his content, the way he writes. I also happen to be a copywriter and I work in digital marketing. So having said what you just said, that there's a need, right? There's a need in his followers to get the next book in the trilogy or the next book in the series. I'm seeing an opportunity there. Like I could go into GPT, and although it wouldn't be coming from the mind of Eric Oglin, it would sound very much like him. I could put all of his previous stories into the model. I could write the next book in the series and then target all of his followers. So you would get the next book in the series, and you might not know that it's not from him, or even if you do know that it's not from him, it would be very, very similar, and it might scratch that itch. Like, would you read that book, and what would you say to people that would want to do that kind of thing? Do you think that's ethical?
I think if they talked to Eric first and they said, Eric, I love this world you've created and I want to create my own spin-off of it, I think Eric might say yes. And I think if they were able to show that they could do that, I think they would have the author's approval, because that creates more ground for the author themselves, because you've got somebody else that's marketing your world. Okay. That's how a lot of this works. Is if you're a professional writer, your real skill isn't in writing the story. That's the first skill. The next skill is the networking, the marketing, the getting out there, getting your name out there. I There are authors out there that I follow because I follow the author. I like what they write, but there's something else there, okay? And I don't know quite how to explain it, but if you're a prolific reader, you follow certain authors, you follow their works, you follow what they recommend. If an author you follow says, hey, this is a great series, you go and check it out. So it's that whole networking effect. And that's something the AIs can't really quite do for you. So even if they could create the exact copy of somebody else's work, they're never going to take that person's place, because it's about more than just the writing. Okay. It's also about the authors and the worlds they create and the followings. I mean, you go to their Patreons, you go to their websites, you look for their next book, you know, you begin to follow that author. So it's more than just reading the book.
I feel like that's really simplistic almost, and I think that's very idealistic is the word I'm looking for. Like, you're writing a book now, right? I know you're writing 4 trilogies, and I definitely want you to talk about those. But if I was to do the same thing to you, like, would you think that that was ethical? Would you think it's just fair game?
Um, well, it depends. I mean, what are you matching? My writing style or the writing style that's coming out? I think that's fair. And I'll tell you why, because what do people do when they first start writing?
And
They
what about
start,
if I, sorry, and the stories? So if I was to read your books and then say I want to write the next book in this series before you write it.
oh, well, that would be impressive. I don't think I would, I personally don't think I would have a problem with it because it would be like, oh, somebody really likes my stuff so much that they're going to start copying it out. I don't know that they're going to take away my market share or anything like that because I don't have a huge reader base at this point. But if I did have a huge reader base, would I be scared of that? Well, no, because again, I have a huge reader base. Who is this new person who's helping to expand my world and you know share my things with everybody else that might possibly get people to look at more of my things? It's almost like having a free ad out there. So I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think I'd be upset about it. I think I might reach out to them and see what kind of networking marketing opportunities there are for that. If it's any good, if it's total junk, then I probably wouldn't reach out and I wouldn't worry about it because nobody's going to read it if it's junk.
Do you see authors getting strong armed over this? So if I look at someone like George R. Martin, the guy who did the Game of Thrones books, made a fortune. Personally, didn't think the books were amazing, to be honest with you, but a lot of people love them. They like the series.
Mhm.
But that means that some nobody like me could just come along, write the next book in the series, and then say to George R. R. Martin, "Hey, listen, I'm going to write the next book in the series. You might not like it, but I'm going to release it. Or you can partner with me, and we can split this."
I mean, those are two different ways of going about it. Here's the thing: if you're just ripping off somebody else's stuff, I mean, like I said, it's just a book and a story. What are you doing with it? If you say that it's a George R. R. Martin, we've already got laws against that.
Mm.
You can't say stuff like that. So we don't need like new AI ethical laws, or we don't need to have it marked as AI because it's a copy or a ripoff. So I don't have problems with that because I feel like people who rip people off like that are going to get in trouble anyway. It doesn't matter if they used AI, it doesn't matter if they used a stone and a chisel. It doesn't really matter how they rip somebody off. It's still against the law. In the other scenario, I mean, yeah, absolutely. This is a chance and an opportunity for authors to expand their universe and their world without them actually having to do the work. And let's say George R. R. Martin, he put those books out how many years ago? Quite a few. I
Mm.
bet they don't sell as much now, Rob, as they used to.
Mm.
So along comes Joe Schmo who wants to continue this world. That's going to bring advertising stuff over to old George's stuff. And it's going to create a little upsurge if it's any good. If it's no good, then, well, what's it going to really hurt? You know, it's not
Mm.
going to really hurt. So if I was George R. R. Martin, I'd be like, well, okay, let me see a sample of it. If it's good, yeah, I'll put a stamp on it and you can do some marketing and I'll end up making some more money. So
I
I
wonder
don't
how
know.
many authors are going to share that feeling. I guess not many, seeing as some of them have gone to court. I think he's in that class action, but yeah, I'd be interested to see that. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to find out if there's anything that we haven't covered about in this subject that you wanted to talk about.
Well, journalism, I really would like to talk about it in journalism. I mean, Rob, does it matter what wrote it? Does it matter? As long as a person has looked it over and validated that it's legit, it has good facts, then does it matter what wrote it?
I wouldn't say so. I think at this point, for me, the way I see journalism going, true journalism is that the investigative stuff is still done by humans, but the writing is probably 80, 90% done by AI.
Well, I don't know. I see a lot of people freaking out about it, and I know they're all worried about the election stuff. But if you're getting your news from like Facebook and Twitter, that might be the problem. Okay,
Yeah.
if you're from Comedy Central or things like that, that's probably an issue. I would spread out those news sources and try to get them from as many of the top levels as possible. Look at the actual news feeds, the AP, Reuters, Look at all of that stuff. Spread it out, man. Look at the BBC, look at Al Jazeera, look at what everybody's saying about everything. But for the love of God, don't get your news off of Facebook or Twitter. I mean, look a little deeper than that. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I was reading something yesterday actually, about social media and how it's changed in the last 4 years. So since the last election, it's gone from being the town square where everyone used to go out and shout and scream and then listen, well, hopefully listen to their opinions and then share those articles. Now it's gone to more of like a private marketplace, as in people will take those conversations to groups that act like a living room. And I think that's what Meta, one of their executives, said recently. But there's been a big push from those platforms since 2020, 2019 to sort of suppress political news and push it away from the feed for all kinds of reasons, for all the trouble that they got into previously. But it does make me wonder, like, I wonder who is going to slip through the net this year, because there's going to be an awful lot of stuff pushed, right? There's going to be tons and tons of stuff pushed and sponsored. So yeah, I do wonder, and a lot of that will be written by bots, but we won't know the effect on it until after the fact, right?
Yeah, it's just a big old bag of BS. That's all it is, man.
It is.
Bags of
It is.
BS, man. Bags of
Like
BS.
and subscribe. Buy some BS.
Buy some BS. Okay, man. I think we got another meeting popping up here. We should probably bail out. I'm gonna go ahead and